We now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Rev Nathaniel W Martin. Here is Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Brother Blackwell. Say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, never good night, and certainly never goodbye. My name is Reverend Nathaniel W Martin. I'm the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church right here in Los Angeles, and we want to welcome you to another broadcast of It's Time. And what is it time for? It is time for justice. It is always time for equality. It is always time for righteousness. It is always time to do good. As the Old Testament prophet Micah said, he hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. Notice it said walk humbly with God. Did not necessarily say walk humbly with man, different species. Thank God. And we welcome you to our weekly offering here. And we thank you for viewing, or hit the like button at the bottom of the YouTube, and hit the subscriber button if you're a new subscriber. And we welcome you. We take our marching orders from the scriptures. There are over 2,000 scriptures that deal with justice and equality. Excuse me. In the 24th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, and beginning at verse number 14, you'll see me take some water. That's all that's in here is water. It's not vodka. Still getting over that cold, y'all. In the 24th chapter of Deuteronomy, verse 14, it says, "Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in thy land within thy gates. At their day thou shalt give them their hire. Neither shall the sun go down upon it, for they are poor, and setteth their hearts upon it, lest they cry against thee unto the Lord, and it be sin unto thee." And not that that's the first mention of a need for equity and a need for equality, and indeed a cry for equality in the workplace or in the dealings of man's interactions with his fellow man. We must state that the first one would have been when Cain killed Abel. And God asked him the great question, "Where is thy brother?" And from then on, we know that man is responsible for his brother. Amen. But did not Jesus Christ come into the world to save sinners and not to save himself? Glory be to God. And so as we look at our present context, economically, socially, here in these United States of America, I must hasten to say that I'm a proponent of reparations from slavery, reparations from Jim Crow, reparations from segregation. Some of you may not know that. Some of you may not agree. Some of you may disagree, and that's good. We can have a conversation. It's what we got to have all across this nation, from sea to shining sea, from the mountains to the prairies. But when you look at the growing and the blossoming wealth gap here in America, then you know that there must either be a social backlash, or there must be some social engineering. And I don't know how many of you are aware that the Congress is going to borrow $1 trillion this year, 2019. Excuse me. And the purpose of that is to finance the tax cuts that were given to the richest 1/10 of 1%, or the 1%, by President Trump when he first became president. Of course, those tax cuts are on top of the tax cuts that they got under George Bush and the tax cuts that they got under Ronald Reagan. All of those tax cuts have to be balanced and paid for by decreases in services, and most of those services are the social services that were used to sustain or to subsidize or to help the poor. Therefore, we have to get ready to tighten our belts some more, because there's going to be a further cut under Ben Carson to the housing allowances. Therefore, there will be cuts to food stamps. If you remember, just a couple of weeks ago when the government shutdown was getting into its fifth week, that it was already being circulated that food stamp, which are what the poor depend on, were going to be not late or going to be cut entirely until the government shutdown was over. And if that's not an elitist class-based decree, I don't know what is. And it reminds me of what the Bible, the warning that Isaiah issued in the 10th chapter, says, "Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed." And the purpose of all of that is to turn aside the needy from judgment and to take away the right from the poor of my people. That's God talking. And God goes further, because God is a great psychoanalyst. He said the reason why you politicians are doing that is in order that the widows, who were the most vulnerable at that time, might become the prey of these wealthy or predatory or greedy or ravenous speculators. And second, that they might rob the fatherless. In the old economy in which the Bible was written, widows were a special class, and the fatherless were a special class, because you needed your father to teach you and to show you your way. And widows depended on their husbands for their sustenance. And once the good man died, amen, then the wolves, the sharks, began to circle in the economic water, so to speak, because they were going to cheat her out of everything that she even thought she had. And that's really not too far from the way things are today, but we're not going to get off on that at this time. I bring you that because of the fact that legislative policies are translated to economic policies, and those economic policies are what we run into 24/7, whether it's the cost of cable or the cost of a bag of sugar or the cost of a gallon of gas. As Dr. William Barber is fond of saying, we live in a culture where you can buy a gallon of unleaded gas for your car, but you still can't buy unleaded water in Flint, Michigan. So there is a continuing and an ongoing exploitation of the most vulnerable and the poor among us. Can we say amen? So God is not a God, amen, who sits idly by and lets these type of things just continue to proliferate and doesn't say anything. And God is not interested. It is written, God speaking, that it shall come to pass in that day that his burden shall be taken away from off thy shoulder, and his yoke from off thy neck, for the yoke shall be destroyed because of the anointing. There's a supernatural power at work with the poor and with God's people, irrespective of how the machinations of the ruling class may attempt and may try, and for a moment may seem to be successful in putting crippling policies and burdens upon the backs of the beleaguered poor. I wonder if you are aware there are several new economic reports that are circulating this week. They're meeting in Davos, or they have been meeting in Davos, Switzerland. I imagine they're breaking up today. Just think about it, folks. 1,500 private planes bringing their owners to Davos, Switzerland. The richest people in the world coming together to talk among themselves about how they're going to continue to stay rich. And in order for them to continue to grow rich, they must continue to exploit those who are not rich. That means the poor. That means you. That means me. And they meet in Davos, Switzerland. Well, you and I can't go. And they come together to talk about how they're going to avoid taxes and how they're going to protect their offshore riches and the like, and how angry they are when the poor began to get together. Mind you, there are no poor people at that Davos, Switzerland meeting. Everybody there is a billionaire, or at minimum, a laughable millionaire. There is a report out entitled, it came out in 2016, called The Ever-Growing Gap. And it says that without a change, if things keep going like they are, African American families won't match white wealth for centuries. It says that if the current trends continue, it will take 228 years. You hear that? 228 years for the average black family to reach the level of wealth white families own today. And of course, that's saying wishful thinking, saying that white families will not continue to grow rich, but they will continue to grow rich. And what is unsettling and frightening about this whole entire dilemma is that black families are growing poorer. It says here that from 1983 to 2013, black household wealth declined. You hear me? Not went up, but declined by 75%. That means it dropped from an average of $6,800 down to $1,700. That's black household wealth from 1983 to 2013. And a lot of that can be attributed to the housing bubble, but then you had the tech bubble and all those other bubbles, and then the subprime mortgage market, and the fact that so many black people lost their houses in the 2007 economic depression, and you haven't been able to make that wealth back up, because when you lose a house, you have really lost a chunk, because that is how you climb up. That's how you get up. That's your first hope. It's the first sign that you're climbing up into the middle class, when you can purchase a home. And the report that I'm looking at talks about the wealth as compared to the income. Talk about the wealth gap as compared to the income gap. And it shows that sadly some blacks were making like $300,000 plus per year, but they were over $500,000 plus per year in debt to the IRS, which means they were living above their means. And as we used to say back when I was in high school, when your income, when your outgo is more than your income, then your upkeep will be your downfall. And that's a quaint old economic statement that they used to have there at Booker T. Washington Senior High School, but it still bears repeating. If you are spending more than you are making, then you will soon be out of money. Soon find yourself in a bad shape because one cannot possibly live beyond one's means indefinitely or in perpetuity, because somebody's going to always call in your chips. Can we get an amen on that? All right, let me return to my findings here. Some of this is from the Economic Policy Institute. Some of this has come from a report entitled The Road to Zero Wealth. And it's a very alarming report because it gives us to see or to understand. And some of it is from Forbes magazine, by the way. And I only mention that because I don't want you to think I'm just talking off the top of my head when I'm talking about the fact that we need reparations. Look at the growing wealth gap. That growing wealth gap is also a chasm of inequality across the social spectrum. Because if you don't have it, then you're going to be further marginalized in this capitalistic society. You may say, oh, no, they wouldn't do that. But, oh, yes, they will do that. And so we have to look for remedies in the rich paying their fair share, their proper share of taxes. Look at employers paying a living wage rather than a minimum, merely a minimum wage. Dr. William Barber made a very interesting observation some time back. I think it was in a speech to the steel workers, where he said it took 400 years to get from 0 to 725. And that 725, my brothers and sisters, is up in 2012 or 2015 even. And we don't have another 400 years to get from $7.25 to $15 an hour. As I always give the outrageous, however very true fact that 400 of the richest families here in America earn $97,000 plus per hour per day, not 8 hour days, 24/7. They make that kind of money. And yet, when the United Teachers of Los Angeles were out for a 3% raise and just to get a little help for lower class sizes, look how many days they had to be out. And the reason why it was settled when it was because of the fact that the district was losing more money by having those teachers out, because when those teachers were out, those students were out. And if those students were not in their seats, then whatever pot of money that the the LAUSD school district gets their money from, that money wasn't coming that day because the students were not there. And so you see, that's a very cynical reason why LAUSD wanted to hurriedly settle the teachers' strike, because they were losing over $100 million in those few days that the teachers were on strike. Isn't that a rather sobering thought? That our kids are needed in order for the district to earn money. But by the same token, the district does not take interest in our students enough to properly educate them so that they may contribute meaningfully to their society. No, too many on the school board are advocates of private schools and charter schools. Mind you, that all of the charter schools and the private schools are backdoor devices by which they pull off public money, public taxpayer money, your taxpayer money and mine, in order to put it in the pockets of the private enterprises, who in turn claim that they're going to educate the children better in the charter school than they were being educated in the public school system. Keeping in mind that the public school system concept grew up from the concept of the slaves, free slaves, who, when they were first, elected into the state houses and of the various states across the South, they said our people need to be educated, so we need a public education paid for by taxpayers that will give all of our students, regardless of their color, race, or whatever, the opportunity to have an even chance in the race of life. 12 years of a public education, free education, and you just get yourself to school every day and apply yourself to learning, and they put the teachers there and put the books there and put the curriculum there and put the equipment there, the building there, and let's go. Let's give these kids a chance. That came out of black minds here in these United States. I guess that's why it's been so hated down through the centuries. And they're still trying to dismantle public education, just like they're trying to dismantle Social Security. But let's stay on point, on message today. We're talking about the wealth gap and how it impacts black families especially. Keep in mind that white wealth increased from $102,000 to an average of $116,000. That means there was a 14% increase in white wealth from 1983 to 2013. Whereas for blacks, let me see, white wealth increased from $102,000 to $116,000, or 14%. Whereas for every $100 whites owned, blacks owned only $5.04. That's quite a disparity. For every $100 that a white person has, a black person only owns $5.04. And 1 in 4 black households have what's considered zero or a negative wealth. That's zero or a negative wealth for 1 in 4 black families, whereas the comparative wealth gap is to zero wealth is 1 in 10 white families. Black families, 1 in 4 have zero negative cash flow or negative wealth, whereas only 1 in every 10 of white households have zero or negative wealth. Conclusion: if this continues, not me, it's the Economic Policy Institute. This is the Oxfam report, and this is the Forbes report. Says that by 2020, 2 years from now, well, no, 1 year. By 2020, if the trend that is going on right now continues, blacks are going to lose 18% of wealth next year if the trend continues. If we don't start holding on to more, if we don't recognize the value of having a home, of having assets, not spending all your money in entertainment and all this other things that pull away our meager discretionary fund. Says that the trends continue. Whites will own 86%. Got this right on the back here, but it's right here in this big report. Oh, God. Whites will own 86 times more wealth than blacks. And if this trend continues, median black family wealth will hit zero by 2053. Now, you telling me we don't have a crisis? Yes, we have a crisis. And someone needs to speak up about it and say something about it. And those of us who are so smug at seeing our brothers and our sisters suffering, we need to wake up and realize that we're all going to go down together, black and white. Remember, we no longer have the covering shelter of race to hide behind. White supremacy has had its day. Its effect, its legacy is still impacting us. But the same science that was used formerly to point out the superiority of the white race and the inferiority of the black race, that same science have now turned around to present the true facts, and the DNA helix and genetic code does not lie. When they were looking for the black gene, they couldn't find it. When they were looking for the white gene, they couldn't find it, leading to the conclusion that there is no race gene inherent in nature. What are we saying? 2 minutes? God didn't make no superior race. And we got to wrap this thing up here. We didn't get very far, but I trust we hit on some of the highlights that we needed to begin this dialogue. I had hoped to read one of the speeches of Frederick Douglass on how they felt when the Emancipation Proclamation was announced there in Boston. We won't get a chance to get to that today, but this is Black History Month. We will get a chance to do it in coming broadcast. However, I must stress again the importance that we cannot afford to allow anyone to defraud or exploit or cheat us out of the just wages or the just revenue or the just recompense for the services that we have rendered. Once your labor is out there, you can't get it back. And so, my friends, as I always say, and that's why I continue to say, black or white, Jew or Gentile, Protestant or Catholic, if they don't want to pay you, don't work for them. Thank you, Doc. We're out.